I know that my grandparents on my dad's side gave me my Korean name, Jaehui, and my English name, I think my parents came up with just because my Korean name starts with a J sound. So they just looked up like English names that start with a J. I know my mom said that like she didn't want like a normie J name for me, like Jennifer or Jessica. So yeah, my dead name is Janice, which I don't use anymore. I can't say that I ever really like resonated with that name. Like it feels like a itchy tag maybe, or like a like pants that are too tight. I'm like, oh, that doesn't fit me anymore, and like I donated that years ago. And I think it was during college that some people started calling me by J, like just the letter J. In particular, my teacher in school would call me by J, and that always felt really affirming. And then I started asking like closer friends to use it a little bit after graduation, and then that's when I started thinking about if I want this to be like my English name as well. After I came out as trans non-binary to my parents, my dad specifically, who like has freely used both of my Korean name and my English name growing up, expressed that he did not want me to use my Korean name at all, and even my current iteration or like my current English name that I go by, Jay, which is the first half of my Korean name. He also said that he didn't want me using that either, and just like any like form or variation of my Korean name, which I find so interesting to be like coming from him after like a whole lifetime of like knowing me by that name also and using that name. He said it very explicitly and firmly, but he was like, this is something that I cannot do. I can't call you by this name. Whatever else you do, like please allow me this one thing, like as your parent kind of. And then he said, because your grandparents gave you that name and I slash your mom and I gave you your English name and that's the one that we want you to use, or I don't really know how my mom feels about it. She hasn't really said explicitly, but she and I text very surface level still, and she'll call me by my Korean name like Cheoya. How I worked through and like felt through a lot of the disconnect was through cooking, and like I had been building up like all of these recipes that I had asked to my mom for over periods of time, and even if we weren't like communicating or talking, like making the food that I knew from her and like also being able to add in my own things. Food has always been such a big way of feeling that, feeling the threads.
Jill is the first name that I've known, given to me by my adoptive parents. Um, I think it's a name that didn't quite or hasn't always felt quite right for me. My full name is Jillianne, and I've always had a lot of dissonance with that name. People would call me Jillian, and I would never correct them when they would call me Jillian. I think I also didn't want to correct them because the name Jillianne didn't quite feel like mine. But that wasn't my first given name. The first given name was from a social worker from the adoption agency, and she named me Ji Young. I remember looking at this folder when I was a kid with my Korean name on it, and my sister and I would always kind of like giggle and try and call each other by our Korean names, but it always felt like a joke and something kind of like that we left on the folders and put in a drawer, something very separate from us. And I think it was a level of protection to always name these jokes, starting with our names. in order to be the first ones for this internalized racism to come out of my mouth versus someone else's. I've had a lot of abandonment issues, and I get really angry when people project that it might be due to my birth mother giving me up for adoption, because that's never felt resonant for me, of like why I was put up for adoption. It's the fact that I was placed in this context with this white family and being raised in an all-white community and having to abandon myself over and over again in order to feel some semblance of belonging and care and love. Knowing that I was named by a social worker and not my birth mom. I was named by my white adoptive parents. I think is like really tied to that dissonance and represents on this like macro level how my agency has been taken away from me from like the moment I was like 6 days old. Like I can see in very tangible ways through my existence how like US imperialism and white supremacy have dictated who I am. And it's like just realizing like that's not mine. So like what am I left with when I really like investigate like what's not mine? And it wasn't until I like went to Korea this past summer that I actually started to like engage with Jiyoung. On the second day when I went to Korea, I went to the adoption agency to go over my file again. I had a friend translate one of the pages. Ji and Young, like both of those sentiments were about this growth and development, ripening over time, over the course of my life, and I truly feel that. G is for wisdom, as in the clarity of sunlight shed on the truth. Young refers to someone whose body and being become precious over the course of their life, their name becoming a source of brightness and warmth that shines into the world. And it was really interesting to hear that reflection back, to hear that name, that vibration of sound reverberate back to me. It felt like an integration of this other version of me. And also, there's something still like a little dissonant that I'm just like, I don't know if that name still like is me. I think over the course of my life, I'm getting closer, and I really see that in very tangible ways by the people that I've met along this path, and especially in this year, being in community with Korean queer and trans folks for the first time. So it's like I'm getting a little bit closer to finding my name and who I am.
I went to go see Wudang Sung, and towards the end of our session, he asked if I knew the Hanja, which is like the Chinese characters assigned to your Korean name. And he said that while he was studying Saju, which is like the Bazi, like Eastern astrology, I guess, he was familiar with the characters of my name. And the first character Che is like when you look at the actual like Chinese character, it kind of looks like a table. And he said specifically in his studies that it comes up as like an ancestral offering table. And then the second character is like specifically like shining a light. So together it means shining a light on ancestral offerings or an ancestral table. I looked into the origin of Che specifically. It's from like butchers, and I guess it also referred to like when they talk about high-ranking minister, like high-ranking official. It's the cook who prepares all the food for ancestral rites. I wonder if my dad or like my parents hanging on to my English name because they gave it to me is like hanging on to like the gift aspect of a name, almost like we gave this to you. Why aren't you using it? Why aren't you appreciating it? I haven't let go of a future with them, but it's yeah, it's not something that, well, I think it'll take a lot of time. Yeah. When I think about my Korean name, it feels more like not only a gift, but also like there is room in this name for like what you're going to grow into or like how you're going to grow. And just being able to choose. I'm going by this name, and this is my name. As a queer and trans person with other queer and trans people, we're all connected and we're not alone. And you know, for some of us, we're looking to the same ancestors and we're wanting to reach them and they're wanting to reach us.
Where do I want to build from here? I want to be in control of that. And it is this returning to self always. There's always this feeling of comfort in knowing that I can and will like return to myself. Little Jill, Jiyoung Jill, all of these Jills, Jiyoungs are going to be held as I kind of move and build in this next circle, this next birth and death.
Obviously, everybody has their own name and their own path, and we're all going to grow in different ways. And we're going to have different roots and different branches and leaf colors and trees and all that, but we're in the same forest. Like we have the same soil. We're talking to each other underground, and we all have our like rings that we're building, and we're cultivating soil for future generations too. And we're still really young, and we have a lot of time to do that.
seeing the magic of being alive and like deeply present, and seeing all of these beautiful connections. It's like this feeling of the deepest trust, the warmest embrace, feeling like the lightest of light, like this radiance just like wash over me. In those moments where it's like I've had that, I know that feeling of liberation, like I felt it so deeply. And things spiral up, where I can like have this moment of just sitting with the universe, with everything for just a moment, and then kind of spiraling down to this reality and being like, okay, everything's happening in like its divine timing. All of these connections are happening in their divine timing. It feels so precious and almost fragile, but I think it's because we have this level of knowing that there's impermanence in our bodies, in relationships with material things, and I can recognize that even if I leave this body or leave relationships, our souls are so deeply connected that we will return to each other in different forms, in different ways, different modalities, and we have in the past and we will in the future. There's something greater beyond us that's holding us together.